first is actually just introduce some people that are here from the county. And I'll start off with Supervisor Williams back there. Supervisor, would you like to say anything, or?
Sure. Well, just, to me, I was just talking. Okay.
There's a little microphone.
Hi, Doss Williams, your county supervisor. This is really exciting for me because what the last 5 years have really taught us is that there is a lot that can be done to increase safety in our watersheds. And having the analysis of what can be accomplished, what we need to do step by step. The vision that I have is just like the decision we made in Santa Barbara a generation ago to march all the way up the creek, one project at a time. That's what I would like to see in Montecito. In every creek, we do every piece of it, one at a time, the things that are most efficacious first, the things that are within our financial ability first, and not stop. Not stop for a generation if that's what it takes, not stop for 2 generations if that's what it takes. Thank you.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, go ahead. So I'm going to introduce a few county people, and just so you guys are comfortable with, most of us are overtime exempt, so there's going to be a lot of county people here because it's super important to a lot of different groups in the county, so a lot of people attended. So I'll introduce the project team later, but we have JD and Jackie back there. They're with the Office of Emergency Services, and I'll talk about why they're here in just a minute. Darcel, she's with the 1st District Supervisor. Julie Hagan is our CFO. Chris Sneddon over there is our interim assistant director. He's doing a rotation for the director position. I'll introduce Tom and Linda a little bit later. Lyle is our PIO. And is there anybody else that I'm missing from the county? I don't think so.
What about you, Walt?
Oh, and I'm Walter McCall with Santa Barbara County. So I'll go ahead and kick off. So first of all, we appreciate everyone taking the time to come here today to listen to us and the interest that we have in the Montecito Flood Control Master Plan. A few housekeeping items that we want to discuss is the restrooms. For those of you who don't know, are up the stairs. It's the building on the north side over there. It's a 2-story building. The female is on the south side, and then the male is on the north side. Second, if you can, this presentation will only, I forgot Commissioner Sonar is here as well. Sorry about that. If you could hold your questions, the presentation will be 16 minutes long. If you could hold them, that would be great. Again, the reason that JD and Jackie are here is they want to share emergency preparation information, and they also want to get as many members signed up for the Ready SBC Alert program. So if you could visit them before you leave, we would greatly appreciate that. And then lastly, the county has begun some preliminary steps to look into the feasibility of doing an additional benefit assessment or a CSA, either from the Montecito area or South County. And although that's not part of today's discussion, Julie, our CFO, and Chris Sneddon have agreed to entertain questions or comments regarding those efforts. So if anybody's interested in that, feel free to talk to one of them. So what I want to do first is introduce the project team. First of all, Matt Griffin, he's our engineering manager. The effort's going to be going through his group, and I did want to mention we have John Fry here. He's the previous engineering manager. He retired about a year ago, I think, but he gave 30 years of service to our district, and he was so dedicated and just loved the stuff that he wanted to come to hear what was said today, because it's just part of who he is, and we appreciate that, John. Also have Tom Fayrum. Tom Fayrum is going to serve as our district or our county project manager. He's also the former deputy director. He served for about 30 years as well. And then Linda Potter, she's with Atkins, and she's serving as the consultant project manager. And the reason we assembled this team of Matt, Tom, and Linda, if you combine their experience, it's about 60 years of experience with knowledge that's specific to Montecito, the watershed, the modeling, historical flooding, and that's why we assembled this team. And then some of the agencies we're going to be working with are Montecito Fire. Thank you for joining us. He's back there as well. We'll be working with the Water District, the Sanitary District, and then Caltrans. Joe Irwin is here somewhere. Oh, Joe Irwin's over there with Caltrans. What's important about the partnership that we're doing with Caltrans is they've committed to partner with us as much as they can to help us try to find funding for any additional studies. And eventually, when we do the infrastructure improvements, especially at State Route 192 and 101, it intersects their facilities, so they'll have to be involved, and they've agreed to do that. Also, Chris Sneddon, although he's the interim director right now, he was also he was involved with the transportation group and still is for the last 22 years, I think. So we'll be collaborating with quite a bit with the transportation group as their local roadways cross our flood control facilities as well. And then lastly, Union Pacific Railroad will be collaborating with them as well as we cross the railroad. So looking at the agenda, we've already covered some of these, but moving forward, we'll be discussing the project goals. We'll look at the project schedule. We'll be talking about some of the challenges. We'll go over next steps, and then when we finish this presentation, we'll spend a few minutes talking, just going over general questions. And then we'll break out to do more Q&A that might be specific to either your neighborhood or your property, but we'll reserve the general questions more for regional questions that would impact others. Okay. So what are the project goals? Well, the first goal is to complete the master plan, right? The second is to have meetings like this to seek public input. This is going to be the first of, I think, 3 meetings, right? And so as we go through the process, we'll probably have other public meetings so we can continue to get public input, and you can provide, we'll give you updates to where we are in our status, and then you can provide feedback on that. The third is we want to have a more systematic way of going through our priorities. Instead of just randomly picking projects, we want to have a master plan or a guidebook that shows us like where are the important focus points in the Montecito area that we should all be focused on. And this master plan will help us do that. The fourth one there is master plans like this or feasibility studies. When we go after grants, they usually want technical information to go along with that, and this document will help serve that purpose. And then the next one there, it's similar to the priorities, but the long-term plan will help develop a consistent document for how we approach flood control issues for both the current staff and future staff of flood control. So it's not in people's memory, it's in a master plan that people could use for years to come. And then the last bullet there, what we want to come out of this process is to look at different alternatives. One of them that it's already nailed in, we're going to be looking at what does a 100-year capacity system look like? What does that footprint look like? What type of right-of-way impacts? It doesn't mean that's where we settle, but we want to see what that looks like. And then the next one is more of an optimized, we're calling it an optimized alternative, but really what that is how do we optimize a design that factors in right-of-way impact, cost, environmental impact, and channel capacity? Where's the balance? What is the public looking for? What are we looking for that could serve its purpose? Because there's pros and cons of going with the 100-year channel, and there's pros and cons with going less. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Matt.
All right, thank you, Walter. Matt Griffin, County Flood Control. This is the schedule for what we're calling Phase 1 of the Montecito Flood Control Master Plan. Phase 1 is essentially a big picture, conceptual type level analysis of the issues and problems that you're facing in the community. And the outcome of the master plan is we want to have a list of identified preferred alternatives that we can implement. So we're currently in the data gathering stage. That's the purpose of tonight's meeting, is to hear from you, the public, gather your information. We understand that a lot of you have lived here for a long time. You have a lot of knowledge and history of what happens in these creeks. And so we need to understand that and incorporate that into our master plan study. The next step will be to take that information and to develop alternative formulations, an idea, a scope, wide range of project ideas. We'll analyze those ideas. And before that process is finished, we'll have a second public meeting. I believe that'll be in October of this year, subject to change. And then once we have that second meeting, we'll sort of finalize our alternative formulation process. And then once that's complete, we're going to start our preferred alternative selection. So we'll get into the details of what's feasible, what are the best options. Before that is complete, we're going to have a third public meeting. That'll probably be early next year. Once we've had that third public meeting, once we've heard back from you, we will then probably finalize phase one of the master plan. Project challenges. You can't really build flood control infrastructure without facing a wide range of challenges. Most of the creeks in Montecito are privately owned, and they're covered with a patchwork of easements that flood control owns. Any new constructed improvements are going to require the acquisition of right-of-way. Of course, the real estate prices in Montecito are very expensive, and of course, private property owners are understandably going to have concerns about flood control infrastructure being built on their private property. Project costs are a challenge. There's no way, there's likely no way that the flood control district can fund the full build out of a Montecito master plan entirely with our own budget. So we'll be looking for opportunities to maybe partner with federal agencies. We've partnered with the Corps of Engineers and with the Natural Resource Conservation Service before in the county to build successful flood control infrastructure. In the late 1970s, early 1980s, we partnered with the Soil Conservation Service, which is now the Natural Resource Conservation Service, to build the Carpinteria Valley Watershed Project in Carpinteria. So as an example. Walter mentioned grants. This master plan will hopefully make us eligible for more attractive for grant funding, both at the federal and state level. And then there are potentially other alternatives for funding also. Environmental constraints. Most of the creeks in Montecito are designated as critical habitat for endangered steelhead trout. So I mentioned the Carpinteria Valley Watershed Project in Carpinteria that has a large-scale debris basin and a whole series and systems of fully lined concrete lined channels. And while that provides them a pretty high level of protection, that option probably isn't feasible in Montecito with today's regulatory environment. There's existing constraints. There's a lot of structures built very near the creek bank. There are private driveways that cross the creek. All that infrastructure needs to be accounted for in the master plan. In addition to county bridges, there's Caltrans bridges and Union Pacific Railroad bridges too that need to be accounted for in the master plan. A very important aspect for new flood control projects is that we have the ability to access them and maintain them in a timely manner. As I'm sure most of you are aware, the Randall Road debris basin was completed last year and functioned very well in our January storms. That has great access off of 192. So we were able to get in there pretty quickly after the storm and access that basin and clean it out and make it functional for the next storm. As we experienced this year, there was a series of back-to-back storms. So without good access, these facilities can become inoperable. So access is a prime concern and challenge for us. And debris disposal. This year, we took out of just the basins and creeks here in the Montecito area, somewhere on the order of 75,000 cubic yards to 100,000 cubic yards. That's equivalent to, probably 6,000 or 7,000 dump truck loads. Most of that was taken to either Carpinteria Beach or Goleta Beach. Those disposal options are challenging. They may not always be available to us. So disposal is just a challenge we're faced with. We need to look for new opportunities to handle this debris. So next steps. Well, before we talk about next steps, I will say that there are several flood control projects that are active and ongoing. They're not tied to the master plan schedule. They will be incorporated into the master plan. Those projects are the San Ysidro debris basin modification, the Cold Springs debris basin modification, a new debris basin on Buena Vista Creek, and we've submitted a grant application to realign San Ysidro Creek at North Jameson Road. So those are ongoing. They're not tied to the schedule, and they're proceeding. So we talked about the schedule for the master plan already. There'll be 2 more public meetings. One to discuss the formulation of the alternatives. So you have a chance to provide input on that. And then there'll be a 3rd public meeting to discuss the preferred alternatives, and you'll have a chance to provide input on that. Once the master plan phase 1 is complete, we'll proceed to phase 2. Phase 2 is going to be more project specific, where we dive more into the preliminary engineering details. We'll develop preliminary engineering plans, and we'll develop right-of-way exhibits of what is necessary to build these projects. And then upon completion of phase 2, that's when we're going to enter the priority project implementation. So once we have our identified projects that we want to proceed with, we can start tackling those. And the Supervisor Williams said, that probably could be a very long process. Along the way, we expect there to be compromises. Walter talked about an optimization. Really it's going to be a balance of what projects provide the most benefit to the community, what projects are cost effective, and what projects can practically be constructed and maintained. A good example of that is our Lower Mission Creek flood control project in the city of Santa Barbara. That's a project that has been underway for quite a while. We're about halfway through there. It's being constructed in phases. That project has a natural bottom to address the environmental concerns. Where needed, it has vertical concrete walls with an architectural treatment. And the existing creek has a 6 to 8 year flood capacity, and the new creek is designed to have a 20 to 25 year flood capacity, which doesn't sound like much, but really it is a successful project. I'm sure some of you know in 1995 and 1998, the railroad station in the city flooded. And I'm sure without the improvements that were not built on Lower Mission Creek this year, that it would have flooded also again this year. So that's most of what we wanted to talk about. Before we take your questions, we could talk a little bit about what we have for you tonight. Again, this is just an opportunity for us to gather information, harness your knowledge and concerns. We have 3 or 4 tables set up with maps. Walter, myself, Tom, and Linda are all available to meet and talk with you. We have comment forms, and we have maps to mark up. We also have, most of you probably received the postcards. Those postcards, we have extras too for those of you who did not receive postcards. That has contact information for our office. There's a site-specific website set up for the master plan. If you follow those links, you can edit, you can put in a comment form there. And we have comment forms here. So yeah, we hope to finish the information gathering in the next month or so. So tonight's not the only opportunity for you to provide information. So with that said, I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions. We're still at the pretty early stages of this, so I don't know if we're going to have a lot of answers for you, quite honestly. So, maybe if we have general questions, we can take those.
Just one second. What we'd like to do too, so the difference between the questions, the general questions and the breakout session, if your question's specific to everyone in the group or kind of community-wide, ask it in this forum. If it's specific to your property or your neighborhood or in your little vicinity, then it's probably best to do it as part of the breakout Q&A session if that works for everybody. Does that work? So I think you had the first question. Go ahead.
I'd like to know how the boundaries of the planning area were determined.
Sure. Go ahead.
Because we live in Montecito, and according to the map online, our neighborhood is not included in this planning area. So I just wanted to know what the criteria was for determining the boundary of the planning area.
Sure, it's the area that drains into the creeks that are being studied. So it's based on kind of a drainage area,
The creeks that are being studied.
which is Montecito Creek, San Ysidro Creek. And we have the map, maybe we can pull up.
So yeah, Romero, Oak, San Ysidro,
Yes.
and Montecito Creek. So those are the primary channels that come from the Montecito area. So it's the drainage area.
Okay.
But again, if that's of concern to you,
Yes, it is of concern.
yeah, so what we could do is when we do the breakout session, you could discuss it with Tom and they could and Linda and just address that specifically. Go ahead,
I
Tom.
might just add, one of the things that we looked at is that we want to have a project that we can complete and get done. So we looked at the areas that were mostly impacted over the years, including the debris flow, with a higher density in order to do that. So, you might be leading, the next creek that we have, Toro Creek, Royal Paragon, those are not in the master plan at this time. Doesn't mean a future phase at that time couldn't do it, but I think to be successful and get a plan for a more concise area with the higher density and a lot of the impact over the years, that's why that limit was chosen.
So higher density meaning density of housing?
Yeah, housing and commercial and, yeah.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Phil Hogan. I live at 30 Miramar Avenue down by the beach, Romero Beach. I've got a couple of comments that relate to the larger community. Firstly, I think that the new Randall Road debris basin is wonderful. It really functions well and served our community well this winter. I'm glad it was completed in time, and I like the fact that it was cleaned out on a regular basis, particularly after the late December, early January storms. The Montecito Creek, or Cold Springs Creek, and San Ysidro Creek debris basins were also cleaned out in a timely basis. And so my hat goes off to you. I think you guys did a great job, commendable efforts, and then rebuilding East Mountain Road near the Cold Springs Trailhead. That was just phenomenal how fast it got done. So I'd like to commend your efforts. So thank you for that. I've got two comments and concerns that might be productive in the planning process going forward. Number one has to do with the boulders and getting the boulders back to the beach. In the state of, I'm a geologist, I have a PhD in geology, a master's and my undergraduate degree in geology. In the state of nature, before any of us were here, there were a series of coalescing alluvial fans in Montecito, and the streams migrated across this alluvial surface and deposited the giant boulders and small boulders, and then the smaller grain stuff made its way down to the beach. Or in large events, like we experienced 5 years ago, and again here in January this year, very large boulders made their way down to the beach. Most of those boulders, or all of them as far as I can tell, both on the tragic January 2018 event, as well as the more recent early January storms, were hauled away and sold by others or given away. But we could really use them along the coastline to protect the coastline from erosion. People collect boulders. Again, we live down at Miramar Avenue. People go down there and collect boulders, and the boulders protect the coastline and the houses and structures. We're not right on the beach, but there are many people whose properties are not being replenished. So I'd like to see, when the debris basins are cleaned out, I'd like to see, well, I think it's great that our neighbors in Sutherland and Goleta welcome the finer grained sediment, the sand and the silt and some of the mud and all. But I think we should keep the boulders here and get those down to the beach somehow to protect the coastline. So that's my first comment. Second comment, I only have two, is that these debris basins, again, the new Randall Road debris basin, as well as the existing debris basins at Cold Springs Creek and on upper St. Ysidro Creek, as well as the new one that's planned, I understand, based upon your comments, sir, that will be on Buena Vista Creek. I'm wondering if we might be able to incorporate infiltration basins for groundwater in the springtime to be spread out in those debris basins, and after they're cleaned out, the spring runoff, instead of it just going on down into the ocean, to spread it out and allow it to infiltrate into our groundwater basins. As many of you know, especially Nick Turner and others here with us, our underground groundwater basins are of limited capacity, and they are being heavily pumped by residents who have wells and all, and we could really use more recharge, either through injection wells or just simple debris basins that we could turn into spreading grounds, similar to what they have down in Orange County. That's it. Thank you.
You do number two, and
Sure,
I'll do.
sure.
So, Mr. Hogan, what you're saying as a geologist is music to my ears. The more that I'm familiar with the science of sediment transfer, the more I realize we should be having woody debris at the beach, we should be having large rocks, we should have cobble, because all of that detains sand as it transports down the coast, which will help protect our coasts from both natural disasters and everyday erosion. So I think our limiting factor is the public's understanding of this. The department takes enormous flack in the places that we deposit material, specifically Goleta Beach, and even more so this time around we deposited more material because we had even more material than what Matt was mentioning in Santa Monica debris basin above Carpinteria. It took us 6 weeks to clear out, working 6 days a week. Truck after truck after truck. And so the pushback, particularly, once you're out of the first month, is considerable because people are like, there's no problem anymore, right? That's what their instincts tell them And so why are we having all these truck trips and why are we having all this stuff deposited at the beach? My sense is in emergency permits, we need to educate the public and tell them this isn't just because it's an emergency. It's because it's good for protecting your home, it's good for protecting the beach, and it's good for the ecology ultimately. To try to get more certainty, we're also trying to push the Coastal Commission. I just set up a meeting between the CSAC, our Association of Counties in the state, and the Coastal Commission, talking about specifically how do we get not just these permits, because we cannot do this legally on a regular basis. We can only do this during emergencies. And it would make it a lot easier if we had a permit to do it programmatically for a wide range of materials, you know, small grain, large grain, cobble, big rocks, to be, and even woody debris. There's a recent beach replenishment project in Southern California that used woody debris really successfully as the infrastructure to rehabilitate and create dunes, to bring dunes back to a beach. And so I think we need to be engaging in all of that. And if I have my druthers, we will. But we've got to educate the public a lot more about how it's the right thing to do for the health of the beach, not just our health.
And then I'm gonna just discuss your second point, and Tom could supplement what I say. But I think that the general answer is the real estate needed for retention or infiltration space versus the space needed for debris basin, I think is significantly different. But the do you want to touch on the second point?
And there's other problems with that too. I think what Matt indicated is, you know, there are regulatory requirements when you're dealing with a water course. Matt mentioned steelhead. So to actually dam up the creek and then create that catchment, you know, that would be a big lift. Now, not that it couldn't be done. I'm just thinking right now, you know, could there be, you know, something done after the winter, maybe when fish passage is over? But it sounds simple, but the devil's in the detail when you actually get down to maintaining fish passage, which is required. And if you saw Randall Road debris basin, you know, there's no dam there. It worked, but because it was done in a manner that allowed the flows to pass through, and then but still allow the depth for fish to pass up. It's been something that's brought up before. I think it's something that we should be mindful of, but also remember the stream itself is a recharge mechanism as well. If you make it a lot bigger, you get more, and so that's what you're saying, and point taken.
Thank you. One other comment related to what you just said is that I don't know how many of you saw the natural pond or lake, small lake that formed at the upper San Ysidro debris basin off of Park Lane West this winter, but it was typically 1 to 2 acres in size, and so it was recharging the groundwater. And it's above the structure that at the lower end of the debris basin, so no changes in terms of halting any migration of steelhead trout. But that's the sort of thing that I had in mind. Thank you.
I'll just mention that basin, the dam, is being modified. Matt mentioned there's a modification that's going to be done there, which would, you know, maybe not be conducive to what you're saying.
Sure.
So what I'm going to do here is there's a few hands. Keep your hands up, and I'm just going to go from my right to left because I'm going to forget who has their hands raised. And if the rest of you could wait till these other individuals ask the question, it will help manage my memory. I'm going to have you go first, you second, third, and then fourth, if that works. So go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering what you are using as your base map for the 100-year floodplain, because my understanding is that the FEMA floodplain maps are pretty far out of date, and they had said they were going to be updating them anytime now, I guess. Maybe you have your own mapping, your own data, so I was just wondering what base map you are using for that.
That's a great question. We have an answer for that. Linda, could you go ahead and address that, please?
Absolutely. So the FEMA project, the modeling has been done. It's gonna take about 2 years or so before that actually gets translated into an effective floodplain map with FEMA. But it is being used as our base condition, so it's the new mapping that's being used as our base 100-year condition to study.
So the benefit that we have is Linda's also working on that process as well. So that's why she's part of this team. Her technical knowledge is very high. Her knowledge of this area is very good and to address questions like that. I think you were next.
Yeah, my name's Andrew Schmoller. I live at 365 Hot Springs. I was very much, like a lot of you, directly affected by this. So this is very near and dear to me and my family. So to the extent that us as human beings can, we need to eliminate the evacuation maps, okay? It's cruel and unusual in almost an ironic sense. The PTSD associated with those maps and evacuating us is awful. I cannot underline it boldface enough. We need to do the best we can as the county. And my kind of hardcore comment on that is, given the property taxes, ever increasing property taxes from this beautiful neighborhood that's generated, I think it's in the county's best interest to make sure that continues to happen. So spending whatever the cost-benefit analysis is over a long period of time, taking into consideration property values, I think is a no-brainer. And then I got, for all the county people here, I got a tactical blocking and tackling no-brainer. Okay, as a person, as probably one of the few eyewitnesses near Montecito Creek Bridge, I saw what happened. I know it happened. I saw it with my own eyes. Okay. I call it the head of the snake came down and blocked the bridge, or blocked the, whatever, clogged up the bridge. There's a huge overflow, okay? So to this day, 6 years later, 6 years or 5+ years later, the same rocks are sitting underneath that bridge. The same rocks! And yes, I'm saying everything twice, okay? Shouldn't be that difficult to clear under the bridges, the approach to the bridges. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you.
Interesting comments. My name is Peter Hunt. I've lived here 50 years. I find some of the things very intriguing. Among them are county flood control, and when it interfaces with other regulatory agencies, such as the Coastal Commission and federal wildlands policy and things like that. And there are oftentimes things I, as a member of the public, would like to see happen that don't necessarily happen. I'm going to try to give 3 examples. One would be, hey, moving boulders, large boulders down to the beach, and maybe we could have a seawall and protect our cliffs because they would move down there naturally. But then we would need to get a coastal development permit, and if we only can do that on an emergency basis, maybe there would be some way where we could look at a bigger picture here. Because these events seem to happen every 100 years, is it? Well, no, I mean, 100 years can happen 4 times in 100 years. But so that would be one thing, interfacing with the Coastal Commission with issues such as this. Secondly, it's been an ongoing thing as I've been reading about it for many decades. What happens with our creeks? Because, well, we want the steelhead to come up to the creeks, but if we allow all these trees and bushes to grow in the creeks, which the steelhead apparently like, according to the environmentalists, well, then we're going to block the debris as it comes down, and then it's going to break out from the creek and flood neighborhoods, and people die. So can we find some happy ground here? Added on to that, Mission Creek, for years, Mission Creek was made concrete, say around Mission Street, about 50 years ago or more. And subsequently, in the middle of Mission Creek, there's a channel that's, I don't know, 2-3 feet wide and 3 or 4 feet deep, and ostensibly, and there are places where fish can go up there when there isn't a lot of water running, and they can circulate there. Not the most beautiful thing, but it seems to be effective in that when you have a big flood, you don't want there to be breakout and take your house down, and you want to save your life, and on the other hand, it gives the opportunity. But what's the dialogue with county flood control and this amorphous group of self-proclaimed environmentalists that are continually saying this and that, some of which they have some organizations that are reputable, but there's not, I don't know, they're a group out there and they seem to be ever-changing, just as county staff is. And the third thing would be the Federal Wildlands Act, I think it was 1995, where it also dubbed Let It Burn. This just can't be, it just doesn't seem, this is my opinion, it doesn't seem like a good idea to, let's say, the Thomas Fire burn for, what was it, 4 weeks? You know, and it comes to right to the city hall in Ventura, and then they beat it back, and then it burns in another couple of weeks, and comes to Montecito, and we have a debris. I mean, how are we able to speak to our representatives at the federal and the state and the local level? And does anybody seem to care? I mean, there should be, in my opinion, some flexibility or an ongoing dialogue to try to improve these policies. The 1995 Wildlands Act was supposed to be an improvement over the way we have been doing things since the 1930s. And locally, we've seen what's happened. So those are 3 issues. I don't know that you could speak to them, but I'd like to see some sort of movement there. I think some good ideas have been talked about here.
Maybe I could just, I don't think that steelhead is the only reason why we don't line all our creeks with concrete channels. I mean, if you went around and asked door to door in Montecito whether they would want to line all the creeks with concrete channel, they would say, mostly all your neighbors would say no.
Right.
So I just think it's important to realize that that might not be a feasible alternative for a lot of different reasons, not just steelhead, but public opinion. But that's not the only way to increase the capacity of a creek. What we have successfully done in Lower Mission Creek is to dramatically widen the creek, to take a shape that's like a U, a channelized, short creek, I suppose, or not a very wide and narrow creek, and make it more of a upside down trapezoid, which is what a natural creek generally looks like. And that'll slow water down, prevent more erosion, and creates the infiltration that Mr. Hogan is talking about, but it also doubles the capacity of the creek.
Yeah, and I'll just address your question about the environmental. So we have an environmental team of 4, I believe. It's constant discussion with the environmental regulatory agencies. It's a partnership. We can't just go and bulldoze and make it all flood control because they're natural creeks. They have resources in there, and there's endangered. There's a lot of policies that we have to abide by. But I could tell you with confidence, our environmental planners do not take the easy route. They're constantly challenging that line and trying to get more work done. They do it on a yearly basis as part of the annual plan. They're having constant discussions with them, so they definitely do not take the easy route. Cold Springs, which we were hoping to put out this last year, was a major uphill battle that our environmental planners finally got approval from on that permit. So we hear you, and we're constantly trying to push that line as much as we can to keep the creeks and the basins all maintained.
And our congressman was actually very helpful in getting Fish and Wildlife.
I have one question.
Let me. I think there was there. I said so. I think
one brief comment.
One brief comment, and then I'll follow.
The website that's on this card gets to 20404. That thing doesn't. The city, county of Santa Barbara, county of Santa Barbara.org/MFCMP is a dead site.
We'll look that up right now. So Linda will look that up. Sir, let me ask.
I'm starting by saying I'm going to give the fact pattern. Basically, I don't think I'm going to get an answer here today, but I would hope that somebody will email me and give me a coherent response. Let me give you the fact pattern. My property, along with several others, abuts the Hot Springs Creek. And surprisingly, unlike the major, we'll call it the Thomas and Montecito mud flow, the destruction caused on the 20th to my property and abutting properties was greater this time than during the mud flow. In my particular case, part of the original McCormick wall, which was a combination of stone embedded in concrete, about a section of about 15 feet just simply got ripped away. Part of our private roadway in this area called Ribbon Rock Park, part of the roadway and a bridge got undercut by the flooding, so much so that in fact right now it remains a continuing hazard, and one wonders what's going to happen next year with the flooding, whether the bridge itself will be totally washed away. Having said that, the community, I'm saying the Ribbon Rock abutting homeowners got together, and there was a gal named Ashley Abelson who really kind of put together a bunch of geologists and a number of other people, and we all met with FEMA representatives. County was even there, and we were trying to figure out what steps to take to ameliorate the conditions. The reason why I say that is I'm hearing people who are downstream from us, and I can assure you if we have another storm like we had on the 20th, you're going to be seeing my oak trees, of which in fact at least half a dozen have been basically, the roots now are just hanging out into the stream along with a variety of other situations. My problem has been that in fact originally, or our problem collectively, the neighbor's problem, was that in fact we first attempted to get FEMA funding to see what we could do about the situation. Before that, we went to the county. I had the county come out, and one of the representatives from flood control came out. And flood control takes the position, which I guess is what they have to do, is that their objective is to clear debris from existing streams. They're not there to reinforce walls or reconstruct walls or put this rampion or whatever it's called, you know, the stone abutments. That's not their function, that's not their job. They're there to remove debris, and even there, they have to move cautiously because in fact, if it runs afoul of fish and wildlife, they may have to go through a long rigmarole of going through their bureaucracy to see if in fact they can even get approvals there. I was told on the QT from somebody, who I'm not going to mention whom, that it's best if I'm an abutting homeowner and I see that in fact there's really debris, whatever that is, pipes or whatever, don't do anything except remove it myself. I do not want to get, however, in terms of when we're doing restoration of our banks, I don't want to get involved in an Oprah Winfrey situation where in fact people downstream from me are going to accuse me of, you know, taking the bull by the horns. So we are caught in a real catch-22, and I say catch-22 because, in fact, even though I researched the situation with FEMA, FEMA does allow in certain circumstances, if it's supported by the county or some institution, some governmental institution, FEMA will come in on an emergency basis where in fact they make the determination that within 5 years, this is what we call an emergency, within 5 years other people can be impacted and it's an emergency, and therefore in fact yes they will come in, and oddly enough FEMA trumps fish and wildlife for emergency restoration situations. However, the problem is even though there is administrative law decisions which in fact say yes, FEMA can come in and do it, FEMA told us, this is at our meeting, that we need to have county or governmental kind of sponsorship to in fact address the situation. So what I would like to get from you, and again, this is not obviously going to be answered off the cuff today, and I've left my email here. I really would like to get a coherent, because we're ready, willing, and able as homeowners to contribute, to pay, to do whatever is necessary, not only to protect our own properties, but also to protect the people downstream from us. And in fact, unfortunately, operating on our own without some kind of guidance from county government or whatever, we're just spinning our wheels. And I have to tell you, unless this thing gets addressed, come the next serious flood, it's going to be, our trees are going to be down at the beach and clogging the debris base. Thank you very much.
Perfect.
I left my email here. My name is John Emanuel.
Thank you, John, appreciate that.
Thank you.
You had a question?
Thank
Sorry,
you.
I apologize for skipping you.
My name is Susan Petrovich. That's my neighborhood. And I heard you, I wanted to second the statement made by one of the earlier speakers about the rocks under the bridges, because San Ysidro Creek, I've been there since 1978. I used to be able to walk under the bridge very easily with lots of free headroom and no big deal, and now I challenge you to do that. And I remember in the old days that was cleaned out on a regular basis, and we didn't have, we had floods, don't get me wrong, we'll always have floods near the creek, but the other question I guess I have is, I heard you mention that maybe there was a different treatment of the realignment of San Ysidro Creek, and are you referring to the elbow or the dog leg being fixed? And is that on a different timetable? Are we on a more urgent timetable, given the fact that the freeway enjoys our mud every flood event?
Yeah, so to address your second question, so we just recently applied for what's called a Hazard Mitigation Program grant to realign that creek. So that's independent of the master plan, where we've already proceeded with doing that. Our grant hasn't been accepted or approved, but we have applied for it. As far as the debris under, I think you're talking about under the US 101?
Yeah,
Is that
well, under Jameson and
under
101,
Jameson?
yeah.
So, Joe, do you want to address under 101, if you can?
I mean, yeah, Joe Irwin with Caltrans. Yeah, so debris under 101, we have our maintenance forces that go out there. We looked at it. I mean, through the process of everything we were going through with the coastal development permit. And what our experts were telling us is that the debris or lack thereof currently under 101 doesn't differentiate from what it typically would have been. So that's how they stated it. So, but our commitment is that if there is debris that is lodged under the freeway or under the highway, under the bridges, we will clear that out, right? And as we get started on construction of the Montecito segment, we're going to be expanding the capacity of the 3 creeks bridges in the southern part of Montecito, or I guess the eastern part of Montecito, so that's your Romero, Oak, and San Ysidro bridges. So those are going to be expanded. We have to put in bulkheads to match
That's right.
the current capacity of the creeks, but those will be expanded.
Are you saying that Caltrans is responsible for cleaning out the debris underneath the bridges under the freeway?
Within our right-of-way,
Yes.
Yeah, so the way, so county flood control, and then you have county transportation. Transportation generally clears underneath clears the culverts, or the bridges along the roadways, and then Caltrans usually does it on the state facilities. So we're going to do one more question as general questions, and then we're going to do the breakout sessions because we only have about an hour left. I'm going to go one more question.
Yes, thank you. You mentioned that most of the creeks within this planning area that you have determined are on private property, and that you're going to have to figure out some sort of a way to acquire right of way over those creeks so that you can do what you do. So I know it's early in the process, but how do you envision that working, collaborating with private property owners and the county getting in there and clearing out and doing what they need to do? And how do you envision that happening? I mean, are private property owners going to be given guidance, as this gentleman was saying, about how to properly care for their part of the creeks in collaboration with the county? Are they going to be held accountable for that? Is the county going to be held accountable for it? How do you envision that working?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, we could go through so generally easements allow us access into the creek. It doesn't generally provide us the obligation to clear the creek. What it's doing is it's providing us the access because we're not the underlying owner. So the way our priorities generally work is we first focus on the requirements that we have, that we legally own and we have legal obligations to clear. For example, the debris basins. As you get into the creeks, and then creeks that or infrastructure, like Matt was saying, there's some patchwork of easements that we have. That would kind of be the second priority. But where it gets gray is a lot of the creeks currently, and this is to get to your point, are not owned or operated by county flood control. So the question is, well, why do we ever go in there at times? Because when we have the resources available, either the manpower or the funding, which right now there's not a lot of, because we spent $25 million on the South Coast this last event, and we had about $25 million in reserve. So it's wiped out. During the drought times, when we have the manpower and the money, then we do what we can to try and help partner with either the community to try and help stop or to try and help regional flooding in the area. So it's a push-pull. Like Matt already mentioned it, we do not have the resources to do this solo. It cannot be all flood control because we don't own the creeks. In many cases, we don't have easements. And we're one of the few flood control districts in the entire state that actually enter into private property to help try to clear. Why do we do that? Because in the past, we've had the resources to try and help do that, to supplement efforts by the property owners. Moving forward right now, as it exists, we don't have that opportunity right now because our funding's been wiped out.
So the limiting factor in how quickly you could implement whatever the plan ends up being is money. But the most expensive thing is not bricks and mortar. It's not the work. It's not the labor. The most expensive thing is the right-of-way that would be required to do this work. The estimated cost, for instance, for the right-of-way for the creeks south of the freeway to be able to take out and put the freeway drainages to maximal capacity, it's about $80 million worth of right-of-way we would have to acquire. So the way you could manipulate the county to do a project in your area is to get your neighbors to donate the right-of-way to the county to do it. That's the reason why we are able to pursue this project over by the dog leg at San Ysidro, is because we already have the right-of-way.
That's right.
What's the difference between right-of-way and easement? Sorry, I'm not a...
So I'll explain a little bit. There's really two levels what we're talking about here. One is Flood Control's annual maintenance plan, where we go in and maintain these natural creeks. We do work on private property where we have no rights at all. We don't have easement rights. It's sort of with
the property owners, they ask you to come on
and yes, they want us there. If they don't want us there, they let us know and we don't do the work. So that's just maintaining the natural creek, usually debris removal, maybe some tree removal, that type of thing. If easements basically give us the authority, the right to go in and do work, it doesn't give us the obligation. We don't have to go in and do work. If we're going to build a flood control engineered project, that's going to need more property rights. Typically, we'll buy the property or we'll get an easement where we have more rights to go in, build an engineered facility, and then once we build something, then we are responsible. We don't have just the authority, we have the responsibility to go in and maintain that facility.
So those of us who live downstream on a private creek, if our upstream neighbors are not properly taking care of their creek, and our homes get flooded because they've allowed all sorts of, we have no recourse against those property owners, and we have no recourse against the county either.
I mean, I can't really jump into a hypothetical.
I'm gonna, one more, so this gentleman has had his hand up, and then we're gonna go break out.
I had a question about the debris. You said there was 6,000 truckloads of debris. Presumably some of that was from down power lines, right? I think that these last crazy water problems that we had down like Butterfly and Oriole, there was a sinkhole in a neighbor yard, and one of the power lines was compromised. So we tried to communicate directly with the power company about burying power lines. And there's nothing that it's just nothing. Is the county doing, or Montecito doing anything to bury all the power lines to prevent future problems?
Well, right.
A little bit beyond the scope of this meeting.
Chris, this is what Chris knows about.
Trying to hide over here. So there is a couple of different types of undergrounding that can happen. One is there's an undergrounding fund that Edison, in this case, in this area, sets aside a very small amount of money each year, and that's designated for different areas. So the county has, it takes like 20 to 30 years to build up enough to underground one little section. And actually, the section that's slated for undergrounding is up by Mount Carmel along 192. But again, like 20 years of funding is going to get a few hundred feet of that done, maybe like 500 feet of that done, or 600 feet. Depends how it goes by the time they get to construction. That's one way to get undergrounding done, not super effective in terms of immediacy. The most effective immediate way to do undergrounding is through that's called the 20A program. There's a 20B program where the people who want an area undergrounded self-fund it, essentially. So they form a district. The district, each property owner is assessed the cost of the undergrounding, and they underground the lines in that area. And that's been subject of a lot of conversation in Montecito throughout the years. Got a lot of different opinions about it, but that's really, if that was a desire of a community, really that 20B program where it's self-funded is probably the only realistic way to get it done in a,
Do we do that through the county, or we do that through the power company?
The county's involved in it, yeah. It's I think the county gets involved in setting up the district, so it kind of helps facilitate the formation of the district and all that stuff.
And then just one last thing, the website is working. We just checked it, so if anybody's having trouble with it, just let us know.
Is it fair to say that we could use the same districting to expedite the flooding problem, the solutions to the flooding problem?
Yeah, that's a good breakout question.
So
Julie and I will be right over there, and we can talk about that.
Yeah, so okay, we're gonna go ahead and do breakout sessions again. Office of Emergency Services is back there. You can come talk to either Matt, myself, Tom, or Lynn.